Look, detectives combing through the hood looking for a corpse. Draco hitting, I don't think your body can endure the force. I whipped the fish up with a fucking hanger or a fork. Told that bitch, go ahead, sniff what you want, there's plenty more to snort. I had an outstanding warrant for a short. Turned myself in, rocking Louis and all my jewelry, I wore the court.
All right, guys, we've got a very special guest tonight, episode 76 of the Hard to Kill podcast. We got Pointman for PB Abbate, founder of Lit of War, co-founder, Lethal Minds Journal, author, OPSO, platoon commander, gunfighter, Casevac calling, belt-fed, air-cooled, beast from 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, leader of men, and a man that combat Marines such as myself are proud to see still hooking and jabbing in the Marine Corps of today. Major Tom Schueman. Give him one.
Yeah. No, that was I just did the corporal's course graduation, and I was the speaker for it. And they read my bio, and I'm like, this is so painful. I always find it kind of, I don't know. I'm not comfortable like hearing my bio read out loud like that. But that version of my bio, I think I can get behind that. So appreciate that introduction.
Outstanding. Yeah. So we're out in Okie right now, getting the Muvies. Where's your head at, man? Is this something that you were pumped for, or is it something just going through the motions? I mean, how you feeling?
How am I feeling about this deployment? I think I love my job. I love being around Marines. I love the infantry. It's not lost on me what a special group this is and what a special opportunity it is to be the operations officer of this battalion and in some small way contribute to the overall lethality of the warfighter. And so there's a ton of purpose. I work very hard, but at the end of every day, I come home and know that that was like good work, that was worthwhile work. Even though that most lance corporals in the battalion will never know what I do, that I am, in fact, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, moving all the pieces so that when they show up on ranges, there's ammunition, that there's a range to begin with.
Absolutely.
And so all of that are the mechanisms and the pieces that operations and logistics and the folks that are in the battalion staff kind of coordinate so that the troops can go out there and just put rounds on range. And so at the end of the day, this is a very fulfilling, rewarding job. And deploying is obviously the natural kind of culmination of what you do throughout a workup. And so we're here for important strategic and operational reasons. Our presence here on Okinawa is obviously intentional. And so, in terms of how do I feel about the deployment, I think it is the natural progression of an infantry battalion's life cycle. And so we're here to do our job, and that's all good. This is my 4th deployment, and the unique aspect about this one is that I have a family for the first time. And this deployment certainly seems much harder than all the rest. And so much as, my first deployment, it's all I wanted to do. It literally, it's the reason I joined the Marine Corps, to go fight. And so I was so excited to get to go do the thing that I've been training to do and hopefully validate myself and show myself worthy, and of course, to bear this title and this profession. And then, when I got back from that deployment, I was headed to a MEU. And so that's when I tried out for recon, because I thought maybe I can go deploy again, and to combat specifically. Yeah, exactly. And so I got So I literally wanted to go to combat again so bad that I changed units, changed jobs, just so that I can go fight again. And again, it was I like fighting, and then when I was for my third deployment, I was a company commander, and when I was at the School of Infantry, I wrote to Monitor an email and I said, send me to 29 Palms, because at the time, 29 Palms units were the only battalions going out to what's called the Special Forces MAGTF, and they were going out to the Middle East. And so they had units in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan. So I wrote the Monitor an email. I said, I want to go to 29 Palms to be a company commander so that I can go to combat. And he said, no one ever volunteers to go to 29 Palms. No problem. Here you go. And so, and usually it's very hard to get a hold of your Monitor and get an email back from them. And this was like in a second. And then I got to I finally figured out kind of what my unit's workup and deployment was, and I got sent to 3-4 Dark Side, and it was a deployment to Australia, Murph D. And I wrote him the Monitor back, and I said, I volunteered to go to 29 Palms specifically so that I could join one of the battalions on the Special Forces MAGTF rotation so that I can get another combat deployment. He said, I stopped grading at 29 Palms. You got orders. Best of luck. So, which, although it wasn't the deployment that I had hoped for, at the end of the day, deploying to Australia was a great time. Hard to complain when it's beautiful beaches and plenty of beer, and so like that was, and so again, something that I literally was seeking and requesting and doing everything that I could to. And so that has kind of been the nature of, and when people talk about this concept of thank you for your service, veterans always make it like, not all veterans, but like many veterans have tried to like make that really weird in terms of like trying to make it a point where you lecture some civilian at the airport or like some poor mom at the mall. It's like, look, dude, you just like
take the compliment.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
that's all. Like it's not a time to moralize or philosophize on war and service and like it's just a grandma. Just like bro, chill out.
Completely.
And so I think, but I would say that. Up until this point in my career, at no point has it felt like service, because service connotes sacrifice, and that sacrifice has to hurt. And at no point in my career up until now would I rather be anywhere else, doing anything else with any other people than the people I was with. And so it didn't feel like service. It didn't feel like sacrifice, because it's all I wanted to do. People I love more than anyone else on earth, at a job I love more than anything else. And so I always felt, wow, I'm so fortunate to be able to do these things that I get to do. Like, how grateful I am that I get to participate in this. And certainly didn't feel like I was sacrificing. There are moments, okay, there's moments you have a hard day in combat. There's moments where you're on a mountain in Bridgeport and it's blizzarding. There's moments where you're in the 29 Palms and it's July. There are moments that I'm like, this really sucks. And it did feel somewhat like a sacrifice.
Yeah.
But those were,
few and far
just
between.
like, yeah. And it mostly, overwhelmingly felt like, I can't believe that I get paid to do this. And I would say, so, this is a very long answer to a very short question, I think. And you said, like, how do you feel about the deployment? And I started off by saying, positive things about this battalion, this job, the Marines. And I believe all of those things, and I understand the context and why this deployment matters. I would just say personally, I'm at a juncture in my life where for the first time this deployment does in fact feel like I am serving. And so if someone were to say thank you for your service, I still would not lecture them, but I would feel like they may in fact be accurately describing what I'm doing for the first time, because I am sacrificing right now and it does hurt. And there is a place I'd rather be, and there are some people I'd rather be with. And that's my family, my children, my wife. And more importantly than me being the one who is sacrificing, which I'm the one who, by the way, raised my right hand to do that. I volunteered to do that. And I still get to do like fun, cool things while I'm out here. I still get to go blow stuff up and go travel the Pacific. And so, but there's a fire team back home who did not, in fact, volunteer to be separated and to experience the pain of separation from their dad. And so they are actually sacrificing and serving, and they've been conscripted into that. And so, yeah, it pains me to see my daughter cry.
Absolutely.
And say, like, can you come home yet? And no.
As you said, that's something you're not used to. You know, this is the first time.
Yeah. So that is like, yeah, that's the answer to that question.
Well, that kind of goes into my first question, man. I mean, I've noticed that you posted a few times, about your family, and I think that can really, correlate for a lot of guys out here that are, going on views or deploying that have families back home. What's something that you would tell them to? I mean, I know the way you answered that, and it's not easy ever, but being a dad in the Marine Corps, man. I mean, as you said, we have our responsibilities, but what's something that you think could, maybe I don't even know how to ask you this without sounding stupid.
Yeah, I understand the question. So, one, I've been reluctant to kind of talk about that in the sense that, I'm not unique in that being the first dad to have to go on a deployment, right? So like, it's not like other dads don't love their kids just as much. It's just like, it's my current season. And maybe it's my first experience with it. I don't know if it's easier or not. And so I always try not to like act like I'm special, that I like, because a million dads have had to go on to deploy and leave their families at home. So I initially was kind of reluctant to talk about it. Then I thought, I'm not trying to make an argument that for anybody for any sympathy, or I'm just trying to share, and maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not. And so, I think in terms of what, advice, what I give is I can tell you advice that is not helpful. That's the advice you get most often, is that someday your children will understand and admire it and respect it. When they're 15, they're going to, and you know what? My son is 2 years old, and all he knows is his dad is gone, and he cries for me to come home. And so for me to say, well, son, Jack, in 10 or 15 years, you're really like it. And so it's not like helpful to know that maybe someday they'll be able to understand. Today they don't, and today their pain is like very real. And so, generally people try to, the first people, like when people know you're struggling with this, they're trying to be helpful, so it's okay. But it's this idea that in the future my children will understand it doesn't help with their present pain, and the present pain that like the family is all carrying. And so I don't have a lot of advice in that, and I guess I can talk about my approach. And this year, understanding what was coming to fruition, i.e., the deployment, I was extremely judicious with my time, in that I was working, I was with my family.
Gotcha.
And which it's like hard to, I don't know how to say this, like humbly, but I am a man for others. And so like, I am always like giving my service to others, and I have a hard time saying no. And so I always am giving of strangers, it doesn't matter. Like someone's, people message me all the time, like on Instagram, like, hey, I'm in Camp Pendleton, like, can we grab coffee or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know this guy, but I'm just like happy to, so I'm saying like, in all things, I am other oriented and willing to give up myself. And this season, this last year, I essentially had to close ranks, and because I'm working 12 to 14 hours a day,
Sure.
And then I'm going out to the field for 2 weeks to a month at a time. I just said, and then I knew I was leaving for several months. I just, if it wasn't my family, I wasn't doing it. And so, for example, like this podcast is something that, you
I was
invited
thinking
me,
that, yeah.
so like months ago.
I fall right in that category.
And any other time in my life, we would have worked it out in a couple weeks and been on. But I just had to shun anything that wasn't my family, and so I think that is the method that I've utilized throughout the last year, to just try to be as intentional and present as I could be, knowing that there's nothing I could do to change the deployment, and there is nothing like physical presence, and this virtual presence, the space time, with the family, it's
not the same.
It is not even like a percentage of people kind of say, well, it's easier now because you can FaceTime. Like when my baby is kissing the phone, who's saying the phone? It's like it's just.
I get it, bro.
And so it doesn't even begin to compare this virtual presence versus physical presence. And so being physically present as much as I could was really, I think,
I mean, this isn't an easy answer. I mean, there's no perfect answer to this. Not being physically present. I mean, there's what else can you do? Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
So we have a mutual acquaintance, James Byler. Had him on the show a couple episodes ago. Great guy. And his story, really, like, he had a very bad experience over there, and I don't know, I kind of wanted to ask you about your relationship with him.
Yeah, I took some notes on your guys' episode. I wanted to try to, there, I found them. Yeah, it's a great episode. Yeah, I'll tell you, James Byler is a great American hero. We were in TBS together. We were at the infantry officers course together. I remember my first like two impressions of Byler are, one, he was incredibly fit and strong. He's the first person I ever saw do a trigger skid up. and I didn't know what that thing was that he was doing, but I knew he had like 100-pound kettlebell and he was doing Turkish get-ups with this massive, and I was like, what is this guy doing? So he was really into fitness and strong, and that kind of came out when he talked about, and I think maybe I'll address that in a second. And then he liked to party and drink, and so I just remember one night we had bunk beds, and he was just puking off the top of the bunk bed. So
love it.
Yeah. So and then he's wounded, and the first time I think I linked back up with him was by chance. I was in New York because I come to New York every year for 9/11 and fly some flags for fallen families on at Ground Zero. And I was there and I went out one night with a buddy of mine from Chicago, who was a recon Marine, but we were friends before either one of us joined the Marine Corps. And my buddy got shot when he was in Sangin, and then got out of the Marines and was at Columbia getting his MBA. And so he and I went out one night to like a dorm party, I guess, at Columbia. And this is after Sangin. And there's like, this dorm was like an apartment, like tall apartment building, I don't know, 25 floors or something. And so each floor kind of had like a different party going on, and we're going up, and we go into one floor and we go into the apartment with the party going on, and up people are like, the Jewish weddings where they kind of like, do the chair thing.
Yeah.
And there's a guy up on a chair.
Stop it.
And they're doing a live auction. This fraternity is doing a live auction for a date with this guy, and these women are all bidding on him. It's a date with James Byler.
Oh.
and he it was just.
Do you see how he keeps that? He keeps that just the best attitude in the world. Like nothing. Nothing affected him, man. It made me really look into myself. It made me look into myself. Like, I shouldn't be letting this stuff affect me like it does. And I understand everyone's different, but looking at the strength that he had to just carry himself, I always look at it like other people's situations. Like I try to put myself in their shoes, and I don't think I could do it. So I just consider him a very, very strong-minded individual.
Yeah, I'm certain he had a season where there was some struggle, but you can either become a victim, or
of course,
and let that, let those wounds define you, or you can, be a warrior and
press forward,
determine your own destiny, and he's a warrior, and he fought through that battle and come out victorious. And he like is a double amputee would still go take the subway.
That's what I mean.
He's take the subway down to Manhattan.
That's what I'm saying.
Just an incredible guy. He said during your guys' episode that might be the best year of my life. He's talking about the workup.
Yeah.
And that workup was special. This is 2009 to 10, and snow, and you're going to war, and the Marines were all just so savage at that time, and it was an aggressive time. And
so I was actually over there at the same time you were. And I just listened to how you talked about, like, when you guys first heard about when you were going to Sangin, and everyone kind of gave that roar, like that 300 roar, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know, do you think the Marine Corps has changed, man? I mean, I hate to put that question at you like that, but I mean, consider this like a Lance Corporal Underground podcast, man. And I take bits and pieces of, what people tell me. And I don't know if that's what's going on in the world right now, or if that's just the Corps,
Yeah, I don't think the Marines have changed. They might, like, use TikTok now, and they didn't like then. But I think they're still like cut from the same quality. They're still the same characters, and so I think if you went to the barracks today, or if you went to the barracks in 2010, or if you went to the barracks in 2000, I think Marines are Marines.
Same thing.
And we're still a warfighting organization, and these Marines are as lethal, if not more lethal than ever. You know, culturally or organizationally, yeah, things are a little bit different. I mean, there's less willingness to accept risk. There's less willingness to make mistakes. But I do, it's practically speaking, even though we only train and focus like we're going to war, there is a difference between being in a peacetime Marine Corps
Force
and a full-scale war type Marine Corps. And so, yeah, and many things that we would rush to the side, not pay attention to because people were quite literally dying.
Yeah, exactly.
We, you know, today some of those things are a bigger deal, or more focus or energy devoted to them than some parts of the GY generation would have been familiar with. So I don't agree with like the doom and gloom people about the Marine Corps, because I don't see it. I mean, I've been out to 29 Palms for major exercises 5 times, and this last time with these troops, they're as good, if not better, than any time I've been out there with. And so you can say what you want again about what the leadership or politically or the DOD or whatever like initiatives or where their focus or attention is at, or the things you're talking about. But what I would say is like the troops at the ground level, the troops are still the troops, and they're just a bunch of warfighters.
Hey, I like to hear it, man. So I kind of want to, transition into, honestly, man, the way you talk about combat. I mean, you articulate it just so perfectly. I got to talk about it. I mean, you also said you didn't come from a military background. So, I mean, would you say it was just the perfect combination of events that sharpened you into an absolute steel unit? Or was it, something else that is individual inside you? Because, I mean, Sangin was tough. I mean, the place was fucking riddled with IEDs ready for you guys, and I come from the mindset of, I don't think that we were, I mean, this is just me. I don't think that we were really properly trained for IED defeat. I mean, I remember being told, tidbits of this and that, but I mean, you really learned how to defeat the IED system by going through it, by patrolling every day, seeing different things, using different countermeasures. But yeah, I mean, talk to me a little bit about it, man.
Yeah, certainly not James Byler, who was trying to saw G.I. Joe like when he was 5 years old. Maybe he's going to be a Marine. What makes someone successful in combat? A little bit about combat. Certainly, like your training makes you successful. Knowing how to do an immediate action drill, like contact left,
yep,
or fight through an ambush, or conduct your own ambush, or use combined arms. All of these things being drilled and being muscle memory certainly make combat set you up for success in combat, which is like the most obvious statement anybody's ever made. Like training helps in a fight is generally what I'm arguing there. And so that is paramount to success, a well-trained unit. And we certainly were a well-trained unit. Many thanks to just my platoon specifically, great squad leaders, and awesome sergeants and team leaders. And for me personally, you could there's this idea of the parade ground officer or the wartime officer. And there's also this notion that you could be excellent in training so long as it's a one-way range, and then as soon as it becomes a two-way range,
exactly.
There are things about your character that are revealed when the bullets aren't notional.
Of course.
And they're not artisans, they're just actual bullets and explosions. And I think it comes down to the heart, and it's a calling. The warrior heart has to be one of the oldest callings or things that have been laid upon a man's heart from the beginning of time. It's important to note that just because you feel called to something, you may end up discovering that was a faulty assumption. And so I might feel called to be an artist, and then I go out and I actually suck at art. I thought wrong, right? I went to try to validate that thing, and it turns out I'm no good at art.
Of course.
And so just because you feel called to something doesn't mean, in fact, you are meant or designed for that thing. And even though I had no military background, even though I was listening to, Dave Matthews and the Doors and Grateful Dead, and just like a kind of like hippie, kind of laid back guy throughout high school. There. As soon as the bombs and the bullets start happening, I am the best version of myself, and when all the world is exploding and there's this explosive symphony going around,
chaos.
I find myself in, you could say, chaos or this entropy. All this disorder is happening. I found that I am able to be the conductor of that symphony and reign that chaos and reorder that chaos and put order to that chaos. And that there are just certain things that people are designed or meant to do. And like Michael Jordan has to have a basketball in his hand, right? Tom Brady should have a football in his hand. I'm not saying I'm the GOAT as just referenced. I'm just saying that people are uniquely designed to excel or succeed in certain professions, and that under that stress, under those conditions, in that environment, I truly feel in those moments that this is my God-given talent and design is to do this thing. And so the battlefield becomes all the fog of war, like the battlefield becomes clear to me. The things you talk about, the OODA loop cycle, and I feel like because I'm able to feel like I have this battlefield vision, like things slow down. And so I'm able, although still moving in real time, I'm able to think through things in a way that it's as if things are moving slowly. And so I just, as soon as the fire starts,
you plug in.
Go plug in to
Bro, that's
place where I
unique.
feel like,
That's unique. And I know you don't like talking about yourself, clearly, but that is something that is, I hate to say it's beautiful, but it's not something that is common. And for you to find yourself in an element like that, I mean, I understand why you want to deploy. I understand, you know, kind of where your head is on certain things. I'm
yeah,
not saying
it's all an assumption until it's not. And then in a moment you find out, oh yes, in fact, I had a suspicion. I had this assumption that this may be the thing that I am designed to do. And in a moment, when you're able to validate that, it is a beautiful, I think, and an encouraging feeling to say, I had this heart. I felt like my heart had this thing. And then you get to meet that thing.
Yeah.
And that is what you're supposed to be doing.
Of course.
Uh,
I mean, you said earlier it's a form of validation. That's something that we're Marines, bro. We deal with the enemy.
yeah.
And you know, that's not, a lot of people think they can do that from training, and when they get over there, as you said, they're not that artist they thought they were. And
Yeah. There's like a meme that is kind of like made this, what I'm about to say, kind of lame now, but like the idea that you'll never be as good at something as you are, and so that meme is kind of like a little bit too like, I am the lion or the wolf, you know, to the sheep, you know. It's like it's like, all right, buddy, just chill out, you know.
Yeah, relax.
But it does. There is such an incredible reward in knowing that this is the thing that I am, in fact, the best at.
Yes. Come on.
In my life. And so like there is something extremely rewarding about that. And the stakes are so high.
Exactly. People are dying.
And the consequences are so real. And so I usually don't, I try to not talk about this too much, because like one, hard. People will listen and generally just, well, not hard. People will roll their eyes at like me, kind of how I look. There's all kind of things I suck at, and I'm willing and ready to admit those things that I suck at. Leading under fire is simply just not. It's just not one of those things I suck at. And, exactly. and so, if you ask the question, I will say that I am comfortable and confident that is maybe what I have been designed to do. I think maybe also being a dad now, hopefully is the thing that I'm also called and able to do well. But I am hesitant in another aspect to romanticize the whole thing.
Of course.
Because as much as it is personally rewarding,
it goes down a dark tunnel sometimes.
I will keep fighting indefinitely because again, it's the most exciting and rewarding venture that you can ever embark upon. However, I would be okay if I had never had to validate that, and if I never have to do it again, because what I want to make sure is that we don't romanticize war by talking about the things that we as warriors find pleasurable and rewarding, because war in and of itself is often very wasteful and horrible and tragic. And so while there is some beauty in doing, like when the sculptor is sculpting and the painter is painting and the warrior is fighting, it is something that's best kept sheathed. you know, and if we never had to validate that, that would be better. But it is important at the end of the day that some men who feel like they are called to the profession are in fact designed for it.
Beautifully said, if I may add. You know, us guys that got out, man, we ask a lot of questions. We're trying to understand, you know, what we went through. You know, when you go through an extremely intense, you know, kinetic situation, I don't know, sometimes you want to understand it. As you said, sometimes they're best kept sheathed, but I've been trying to understand Afghanistan since I got back. And I think, you know, historians or, you know, war buffs are going to be looking into that for the next 10 years and not know what to say about it. But, you know, I just didn't understand over there. I mean, we would always hit just roadblocks and weird situations. It just would make me think. And I'm sure I can tell you're a thinker as well. I can only imagine that, you know, something that really shines with you is, I mean, how old were you on your first one? 25, 26?
24.
So to be 24 and have that type of responsibility, I don't think we talk about that enough. And I know the Marine Corps is big on that, you know, and it's something that I think, you know, really works in our favor because we can show that we can handle it. But being a 24-year-old man in charge of, you know, a platoon in the most kinetic, dangerous area in the world comes with certain things.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly comes with responsibility. In terms of, there's a line in Matterhorn, it's probably my favorite novel by Carmelantis and maybe cross-shipment because of two commander in Vietnam. And at one point, one of his Marines turns to him and says, just tell us where the oil is at. Like, if there was oil here, it would at least make sense. Like, I would know that we were fighting for oil in Vietnam, but like, what are we fighting for? Yeah. And, you know, he's tempted to give him some officer-like answer, and you're fighting for the people's security and independence and democracy. And it's like, and he just is like, I don't know. And so, you know, I think what was, if you try to make sense of the war, you're often going to be left very unfulfilled and dissatisfied. And, you know, and the more and more retrospective we get about how things have developed, you know, it would only make you question what we maybe thought even more. And so I think guys like Tim O'Brien and Carmelantis, they went into Vietnam. You know, Tim O'Brien almost jumped the border, and Marlantis was at Oxford or Cambridge, you know, studying and was pretty against the war before he went. And so these guys were much more like intellectually developed than I was, and understood that there were a lot of issues with the justification of the war and the execution of the war. Whereas like me, I was still, you know, apple pie and just like, look, my country is the good country. These are the bad guys, and we go fight bad guys. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't overly introspective while in the midst of fighting, and maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong, but at the end of the day, there were some guys who were trying to kill me, and I was trying to kill them, and they were trying to kill my Marines. And so, like,
that's all that mattered.
That's what I focused on. As the years passed, you know, I remember still to this day seeing the New York Times headline that like Sangin had fallen. It's like 2014, and U.S. advisors left Sangin, and within 24 hours, the Taliban, and it's like, that was.
I know you had to. I know that had to hit something in you, dude.
Yeah, and so there was, so when you ask me about it today, I've been kind of mourning and reconciling for over a decade. That's like literally the blood is still wet on the bases and on the ground and on the dirt there from my friends and from my Marines, and we leave, and the next day the Taliban moves in, and it's like, what the hell?
Who makes those backdoor decisions? I got to ask that. I'm not asking you, but those are the questions that go through my head. I mean,
and I think General Kelly talks about this, and he gets asked the question a lot. Obviously, his son was killed there, and so what is like saying what does Afghanistan mean to you? It's like, well, he says like, we were sent there to fight, so we did. And I don't know if I have a much better answer than that. And
there is one.
And so I think presently we can kind of take a couple courses of action about that, and that is just continue to attempt to demand accountability for people who have made strategic errors or blunders. And then we could try to be a warning when the fervor gets all stirred again to go into the next war, and we could just maybe the veterans can have a collective voice, the veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq, and just say like, hey, before we go give our very best in a far off land, what's the mission?
Yeah.
What's the end state? What's the objective? How does this war end? What does war termination look like? What does victory look like? If you can't tell me how it ends, what the victory looks like, where we plant the flag and we say we won, we're coming home now, then maybe we shouldn't just meander our way blindly into some costly affair. And so those are maybe some of the things that we can do as a community to take some corrective action, maybe.
Okay. Something else that really resonated in me about your story, man, was Zach. I don't think it's really talked about enough how much those guys really helped us. And when it comes to that's something that I really fell into over there, because I work with interpreters a lot. And I had one that was very similar to yours. The way, as you know, it's difficult to be an interpreter, and what they tell you can sometimes be lost in what was said. The way they interpret what these guys are saying to you is so important, because if you don't know exactly what these guys are saying or where their head's at, you're not going to make the right decisions. And for an interpreter to like decide to tell you the truth about something like that, I hear you. I understand why you brought it back with you. It's a big deal. And I know that a lot of those guys that got kind of lost in the whole fall of Kuwait, and didn't end up coming back. But I guess, can you talk about him a little bit for me?
Yeah, he was my interpreter on my first deployment, and most interpreters at the time were quitting, and if they didn't quit because they couldn't speak English or Pashto or Dari, and they wouldn't be able to find another job. Whereas if they were skilled linguists, they knew they can just go back to Camp Leatherneck and would get reassigned to another unit because the demand was so high, and so they could go to a safer place than walking around in a minefield. And Zach was different. He was there to serve his country and was willing to take risks associated with serving his country. And he went from somebody who was just transactional in their ability to tell us what other people were saying and then tell the people what we were saying, to someone who was part of the unit, part of the platoon, and part of the family. And so sharing the same hardship, taking the same risks, going above and beyond their duty. He just simply became a brother, and so he was heavily persecuted. He was poisoned. He was tracked down to his home and given night letters threatening to execute him. And so, yeah, I mean, I owed it to him. This country owed it to him because the country literally signed a contract with him called the Special Immigration Visa.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, when he tried to leave in 2016 after being poisoned, I tried to help him, and then I failed, and then I kept trying to help him and kept failing, and it culminated there at the airport in Kabul in 2021. And fortunately, I had some friends who were able to rescue him and his family after a very harrowing experience, and thank God he's here and he's safe. And so there's a whole book about it. It's better. I think it's better to hear from Zach's perspective. That's why I was really important to write it with him. So,
okay. Are you you guys still in contact, or?
Yeah, we talk usually every month. He's doing well in San Antonio. Had another kid since he's been in America. He's working hard, and unfortunately, his case is still not settled. It's over 6 years, 7 years, going through this. But at the end of the day, he's not going to get killed by the Taliban. So that's
exactly. I hear you there. And keep in mind, guys, like, and sir, I know this stuff isn't bringing back these memories isn't the easiest thing. Keep in mind, I do a lot of podcasts. I talk a lot about a lot of things, and when you shut off the microphone and you're done, these things are still in your head. You know what I'm saying? Like, and no, you brought this up a little bit about compartmentalizing. Is that something that you use to deal with, things like that when it comes to PTSD or anxiety? Because that's something a lot of guys are struggling with, man.
I think, compartmentalization is a double-edged sword, in that to be an effective leader in combat, you must excel at compartmentalization. When a man whom you love is wounded or killed, there are emotions that you are going to feel or start to feel that will drive thoughts, which in turn drive your actions. And if you allow those emotions to take root into your thoughts, you are at risk of making decisions that may not be the most rational and objective and effective, or maybe legal decisions in that moment. So you often have to snatch that feeling as it emerges and put it in a place and say, I can't feel you right now. Because I can't think about the things that I know you're going to want to make me think about. And you keep putting those feelings in a vault and locking it. And you can stay very mission focused. And that's critical.
That's something that I did as well, man. I stopped feeling things over there, but it really kind of, as you said, being a double-edged sword. When I came home to my family, I couldn't I didn't know what to do with emotion. I didn't know how to show emotion, and I really struggled with that. I started freaking out when I felt feelings. I didn't know how to use them correctly. I was weird. I was like crying weirdly. I felt like my estrogen levels were high or something. I didn't know how to handle things, but yeah, that strikes a chord with me, man. I hear you.
Yeah, it's when you deaden the nerve pathway to feelings, and then if you attempt to reconnect that pathway, it's it's scary. Two, you may not know how to appropriately, if that is even the right term to use appropriately, because there's not like a script
book thing. Yeah, exactly.
And so, and what you find is that it's, in a lot of ways, it's easier to get through life compartmentalized, and
not if you have a girlfriend or wife.
Yeah, it's just certainly not healthy in that you become cold or emotionally unavailable, and when you are unavailable and cold or detached, you aren't experiencing full richness in your relationships, in life in general, and so that is a significant danger of perpetual compartmentalization or over compartmentalization, and the inability or unwillingness to reconnect to your emotions and to your feelings. And for me, for the longest time, it was a convenient excuse that I'm still a Marine leader. So I would continue to convince myself that I just don't have time to
I got you.
figure out that feeling. And to a degree, it was true. I did still have to lead my troops effectively, but to a greater degree, and to a more truthful degree, because I was scared. And I was scared what would happen if I felt those feelings. What would happen if I opened that vault, or if I took a peek in that box that I've kept the lid on for so long. And but just because you don't feel that feeling in that moment doesn't mean the root or the source of that feeling goes away. It's still growing. You can keep the lid on it, but it's still growing. And at some point, it will emerge. And when it does emerge, it emerges in unhealthy and destructive ways. And so I'm actually in a place right now that I'm trying to walk a tightrope in feeling and not feeling, because when my 4-year-old daughter, cries to me to come home, it is so painful that my natural tendency, my natural inclination is to grab that pain and say, don't feel it. You can't feel that right now. You have to be focused. But I look at that, and what may be more hazardous than not feeling that feeling is to stop having emotions around my 4-year-old daughter. And so I could see myself deadening the nerve to my children crying or my children being hurt. And that'll help me professionally right now, and maybe even a little bit personally right now. But I am worried that if I don't feel that pain viscerally, that will manifest unhealthily.
Of course.
And so I'm allowing myself to feel that pain each time, which is brutal. But I'm trying to keep those pathways, those emotional pathways open. so as to not have to try to relearn them when I get home.
How'd you become so self-aware, man? Is that PB Abbate coming out, or is that just you being well read, or is that just you going through experiences? Because and when I listen to you, I feel what you're saying. I have a real problem with putting what's in my head, out of my mouth sometimes. But when I listen to what you say, it just, it's exactly how I feel. And I don't know, how did you, that's not easy to do. I mean, I know you're over here talking like it's secondhand for you, but that is not easy. Understanding yourself is a process. And I had to go through, I'm still going through it. And I don't know, maybe that's just the journey you're on and the place you're at right now. But I mean, hats off to you, man. It's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, this understanding, I think, it's a lifelong journey. I understand, or I'm self-aware about some things through failures, mistakes.
Of course.
And so when you make the same mistakes for long enough, when you fail long enough at something, you should do some self-assessment and say, why the post-blast analysis or the BBA, right? Yep. Post-mortem, yep. The after action, the debrief. At some point, you got to look back and say, why am I the way that I am? Why am I experiencing the way that having these experiences? Why am I acting the way that I'm acting? And again, I think for like a 10-year period after combat, I just kept the horse blinders on and just pushed and continued to make the same mistakes, continued to be the same destructive person that I was, continued to leave a wake of chaos behind me. And but never stopping for a moment to be like, why do you act this way? And
that's not easy to look at yourself and be like, this is me.
Yeah, I to pause and to do that self-assessment again, it takes courage, and you may not be able to do that independently. You may not have the right lenses to look at it. And so I do think that forever I am pulling the pin on the grenade, milking the grenade for a couple seconds, putting the spoon back down and putting the pin back in. And so why do I keep and sometimes even I'll throw the frag, walk out, blow the room up, and then and so why do I keep repeating this behavior? I think a couple of things all intersected maybe at the same time. One, the stakes got higher once I had my first kid.
Of course.
It's like, if you blow this up, you've blown it all up. You've really blown it up. And you
can't come back.
And now that there's collateral here and that you can screw your own life up. And you've been doing a great job of that for a long time, right? You can't screw this kid's life.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, two, I went to Georgetown and I got to study and read. And so for the first time in my life, I didn't have the excuse that, I got to lead these troops. It was like, just me reading and writing. And so you spend a lot of time in thought in an English program. And so I'm being exposed to kind of all these new ideas and this new literature. And I'm really discovering a lot through writing and through reading. And so this is where I would say I started to like peel back the layers of the onion and reading Dr. Jonathan Shea and I just think that I started to understand mental health a little bit from an academic perspective, just through reading and research. And then this is kind of where I embarked at my own 2018, probably kind of my own journey as well of self-discovery. So you talk about the self-awareness, and probably didn't start until one, I had my kid, and two, I started to really read and write about it, to start to process it. And then, despite I did start to develop some self-awareness, and I did start to understand that I always had assumed it was that what made me comfortable, because I had such a chaotic upbringing, so much disorder, that what I thought brought me catharsis, or what I thought I was searching for, is the reordering and restructuring of the chaos. And I thought that's why I do really well in combat, because it's disorder and chaos. And I have a history since I've been a young kid to need to bring equanimity to that, or to have equanimity through that, so I can bring homeostasis or restore the order. And so, but what I found is that whenever I put the puzzle pieces all together, I don't know how to be comfortable when all the puzzle pieces are together. I don't know. What I was looking for is to smash the puzzle. And when all the puzzle pieces are all scattered and everything's that's actually, I'm like, okay, this is now my, and so when I still found myself tempted to blow everything up, even after I started to have the self-awareness, I was beyond my depth or scope to do any more self-help. And so that's when I went and I talked to the shrink, and she starts talking about this idea of thoughts, feelings, and actions, and she starts to dig into, like, well, where are these thoughts coming from, which are making you have these feelings, and then you're acting out because of your feeling, how you're feeling. And so that was horrible.
Of course.
Of course. Horrible. And
I've been through a few, bro.
It was good.
I bet you scared the shit out of her.
And so as we kind of started to get to the origin of some of these thoughts, and then I started to notice how some of these thoughts are driving the feelings. That was so how do you get this self-awareness? I think for me, started in 2008. It's been now a several year process of kind of being really deliberate about understanding. I'm not a victim in any of this. If any of this, I have the ability. I am influencing these outcomes in my life, and it's not just all chance and circumstance. There's very much, I am an active participant in these outcomes, and so I have no one else to blame but myself, and I have to take full accountability and responsibility for these outcomes. And to do that, I need to know what is driving me to do the things that I've been doing and to act the way that I've been acting. And so, I think that is how I've achieved a degree of probably self-awareness.
Gotcha. So if I'm trying to think of this, I mean, we deployed similar times, and I try to think of, if I stayed in, I'd probably be like a gunny or like a master sergeant right now. Do you see a lot of like the staff NCOs in the Marine Corps today struggling with PTSD? Is it something that is present in today's Marine Corps? And if so, how are they dealing with it? I mean, the same way, going to see the wizard, learning about yourself.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by great staff NCOs. In my battalion, the gunnies we've all, like you're saying, kind of on that same timeline, have all been in combat around the same time that I was in combat. And you know, my master gunnery sergeant, he saw it all. And I can't necessarily tell you how each, it's like a very individual process or journey for everybody. And so I can't tell you how any one person is dealing with it. I can tell you a few steps, and maybe as we get closer to the end here, maybe kind of how I thought be helpful to navigate this. And again, this all kind of starts with Dr. Jonathan Shea, who wrote Achilles in Vietnam, and he is the preeminent scholar on moral injury and veterans with PTSD, VA psychiatrist, and his conclusion, if you were to distill it down to the one thing, is that it is through connection and community that we heal. And that's because man in general, but you know, in particular, warriors want to share their stories, but they don't feel heard, or they don't feel like another person can really understand except another warrior. And so I will tell you that there is a certain easiness about being with another fellow warrior, and that it is unique and special. And it is my preferred, like if you were to ask me what I would do on a weekend, like hang out on a buddy's patio, backyard
with the boys, of course.
And just, that is the easiest, most kind of pleasurable thing that I can, if I
That's honestly why I do the podcast, man. Honestly, that's what I get out of this, is, you know, that exactly.
I do caution against this idea, though, because again, I just think some veterans that take some of these things to like extremes. For example, like I said, like to thank you for your service, or I'll never be good at killing people at anything else that I was at killing people, like you know, stuff like that, right? So I will say, like, you know, kind of in that same vein, is that this, you know, it's back to Rambo First Blood. It's like like you sent me over there, you wouldn't understand, you wouldn't, you know, and or born on the 4th of July, Kovac yelling at his mom, you know, and saying and it's the idea, like, well, you wouldn't get it. Well, that's true. Like, your mom probably won't understand, and the lady at the mall probably won't understand. Is that their fault?
Yeah, but would you want them to? Yeah,
that is my next question, right? Would you want them? Like, the very reason that I volunteered, part of the reason at least, is so that other people wouldn't have to do that.
Exactly.
And so am I then going to resent society or hold it against someone that, like, you wouldn't get it, it's like, or you don't understand? It's like, yeah, of course they don't understand. They didn't join the Marine
why we did it
at the time of war.
I hear you, bro.
And so I do think, while I'm advocating for that community within a warrior tribe, I do think it's important to note that we're not hostile or resentful to a society when we were part of an all volunteer force. And so you've got to have, first and foremost, some community, and then you've got to have some purpose. And these are now, you know, everybody's kind of talks about these concepts, but I think also you're talking about what are ways of navigating mental health issues. I think, like, your overall health is important, and that includes, you know, your diet, exercise. So if you aren't getting outside,
being proactive,
if you stay in your room, if you stay in your basement, if you stay in your house all day,
it's gonna get worse.
The world is, you know, when you go outside and there's sunlight on you, like, it's just the things it is. So I think that's a really important part of health. It's just like being outside sometimes.
Yeah.
I think if you have a steady diet of unhealthy food and alcohol, like, well, yeah, you're probably
Killing yourself.
That's probably, and so I think you got to do something healthy to include what you put in your body, how you exercise, and doing something outside.
Absolutely.
So I think that's okay. So the other one of the other kind of key factors here is relationships, and I'm specifically talking about romantic relationships because who your spouse is, who your girlfriend is, picking the right one is probably the most important relationship that you're going to have in your life. And so, picking the right partner to do life with, a person who has shared values. So long as your values don't suck, right? So not everyone's values are good. So you don't want, so if you have sucky values and you have, that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about working off of a premise that you have good moral values.
And she has the same. I hear you.
Yeah. And so I think, there's so much strength that you can draw from when you are a team united with someone who you love, and it's just such a better way to get through life. Man and woman, we're designed for one another, one to nurture, one to provide and protect. And when you put those things in harmony together, it's just the best way to do life. But people who are most at risk, one of the highest risk factors for suicide is a breakup. And so, we have to be really cognizant and alert when our friends
those signs
are going through heartbreak, going through a breakup, because the heart is so irrational. It's so irrational. And it's so powerful that it could really drive.
Yes, it can.
What's going on in here. And so you got to watch out for your buddies going through those breakups. The next factor I would like to talk about is time. And that is having a firm understanding that you can always do something for a minute, for an hour, for a day, and so maintaining that perspective that you don't think about time in an infinity expanse in front of you. You think about time incrementally, and if you commit to making it through a minute, I promise you can always make it through a minute. If I were to say, okay, like, you just got to think about 20 years from now, like 20 years from now is so crushing. It's such a expanse.
Yeah.
And so, we think, well, we're never going to get over this. We're never going to and sometimes it will take several years or a decade or a lifetime to kind of get through something. But if you approach it a minute and an hour at a time, I think you'll find that the days will pass.
Is that more living in the moment or the present?
I think it's responsible to obviously have a plan for tomorrow, but that we are, when time feels like it's crushing us, when we feel like a circumstance is crushing us, we do just need to be present in the moment and get through that next minute, because sometimes that next minute is a life or death struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So commit everything you have to making it through the next minute, and then commit everything you have to making it through the next 60 seconds. And I think if you look at that as near-term objectives, you'll find yourself putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually you will walk out of the valley.
Gotcha.
Outlook is another one I want to discuss, and the idea of outlook is, we never hope for the tragedy. We never hope for the loss, but we understand, we have a realistic outlook of life, and we understand that the tragedies happen, the traumatic events occur, and while we are not thankful in and of itself for the trauma or for the tragedy, over time we can begin to view the value in the adversity and in the hardship, and we can start to say, what did I learn from that thing? What am I learning from this hardship? What am I learning from this adversity? And so your outlook and your perspective are everything, because you only have like really two ways to look at it. And you can look at it as if you are the victim, and that these things are done to you, and that you have no ability to do anything about them, and that you are oppressed by the oppressor, and that there's no agency, there's no autonomy, and you can remain a victim to your circumstances and be bitter and make excuses. Or at some point, you may want to take ownership of your life, ownership of the circumstances, and say, this has been unpleasant, and maybe to the extreme. It's been horrible, but I'm still standing, and I'm still here. And what can I make of this thing? Because these are the cards that I've been dealt.
Yep.
And there is no folding. You just got to play them.
No.
And so I think outlook is important. And then
that just hit close to home.
And at some point, if you're doing all these things that I'm discussing, and you find yourself unable, you've attempted to kind of work through them on your own. You've talked to a buddy about it, and you still there is in fact someone who can help you navigate these things, who's professionally trained to assist you. The first time you go scuba diving, it's probably recommended
that you go with an instructor and you get certified. The first time you go skydiving,
Yep.
you probably don't want to just pack your own parachute and jump out of a plane, right? There are many things in life where we rely on someone who is certified to take us through an experience.
Yep.
And so if you find yourself unable to get through an experience that you've had, you may rely upon someone who is classically trained as to help you understand and make sense and move and navigate that thing. When you go on an African safari, you hire a guide because you don't know where the water buffalo is at, So like maybe you hire a guide to help you take you through this safari. Maybe two more, friends. I think who you keep company with.
That's huge.
It's so important. Yeah. Because no matter how strong of character you are, you will adopt and you will take on the tendencies and the characteristics of the people who you surround yourself with. And so if you are not regularly evaluating, there's all these means, like if the people are in your circle aren't this thing in your 20s or 30s, or like these are all like silly entrepreneur stuff. But like if you aren't from time to time looking at your circle and understand who the people are, and are they
are they the people
You want to be.
who you share the same values with, who you be proud to be, who you are have the same types of goals? You won't. I always say the one saying that my dad taught me that I've said 100 times, now is like, if you hang out at the barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And so if you spend enough time with people in certain environments, you will do the things that those people do in those environments.
Yeah.
And so just be so deliberate about who you're spending your time with, and do those people make you want to be the best version of yourself?
Yeah.
And that is something that I am more cognizant than I think ever before, is to who I spend my time with. And because there are certain kind of cultural or social such a period of where some values are very clearly revealing themselves as to being congruent with the things that I also value, or incongruent. It's easier to kind of understand who I would need to be aligned with in terms of my friendships and my companions. And so I've been really, really judicious in terms of
that. Have to be.
And then finally, I always say that the most dangerous course of action is hopelessness. The enemy's most dangerous course of action, the MD killer, is hopelessness. Because if you come to a point where you truly, resolutely are convinced that there is no hope, then why not?
Yeah, I know.
If the world, if everything will only be horrible, if it's only darkness and doom, then why not? Like, you can't.
I know.
How could I? You have to hold on to a belief, and a belief. You can't have a belief without hope.
Yeah.
You have to believe in something, and whether it's your family, whether it's your country, whether it's your state, God, if you don't believe in something that tethers you to hope, without a cause, without a belief, there is no hope. And for me, everything that I have believed in outside of my faith has at some point let me down, to include myself, my country, my family, my spouse. Everybody at some point has let me down, except my God. And so that, for me, is the belief that sustains my hope, that even in my darkest hours, even when the flood waters are rising, in the midst of the storm, there's always a little bit of hope. And if you have a little bit of hope, you can keep on going.
If you don't mind me asking, did you find your faith post deployment, or was that something that you had prior?
No, thank God.
That's something that I struggle with. That's why I ask.
Yeah. Thank God I had it before, because it is what sustained me.
Got you through. Gotcha.
In many of the darkest nights of my life. And if I had not had that hope in Jesus Christ, I don't know if I'd still be here today.
Okay. I got two more for you, buddy. I'll try to keep it as painless as possible. This one I ask because I feel strongly about it. I'm sure you're aware of the Harmon Karzai, International Airport incident with Sergeant Tyler Vargas.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to point any fingers or throw anyone under the bus. I'm just asking how you feel. I
Yeah, I mean, I will have to answer this question differently than your other guests because I am still active duty. It's just the fact of the matter. I think the entire fiasco and calamity of the end of that war, that it is clear, and I mean, and I guess I can like cite congressional studies now, and there are many studies now that are published by the government that say like things didn't go well, and if you couldn't simply observe that with your eyeballs, there's now like many public reports that also say it didn't go so well, and then you could say, well, okay, so we all recognize it didn't go well. Who is actually trying to frame it in a way that it did go well?
Yeah.
Why would they frame it that way? And if we can all pretty much come to agreement that it didn't go well, what have been the consequences for those responsible?
Yeah.
And so these are just basic leadership 101.
I know.
Is the idea that you're responsible for everything your unit does or fails to do. Basic tenets of accountability, basic ownership for your actions and outcomes. Yeah. And you wonder where that is in all this.
Yeah, of course.
And that's what I would say.
And see, I knew that already. I just, you being active duty still, I think of if I were active duty and I saw that happen, it would just be like a gut punch to what I just did. And yeah, there's no easy way to talk about it. But I hear you. So
yeah, it was a gut punch to anybody who served in Afghanistan. And that gut punch is what is termed moral injury, and it's the sense of betrayal, and it's that for a time somebody told you this is important.
Yeah,
we're winning.
Yeah,
we're committed. What you're doing here matters.
Yes.
And so, and you're young and impressionable, and you want to believe these things. And so when someone in a position of power or leadership tells you, we're winning, this is important, we're here to make these sacrifices because it's really important that you have a free, and so you think of, and then when you say, when that happens, you say like, well, that was a lie. And yeah, you when you trust somebody and they betray you, it cuts deeper than any other wounds. And so
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we'll downshift here. Force design in 2030. I'm on the outside, man. What does this mean? What can you give me a quick pros and cons of what we're looking at?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of scholars who can give you much better, more analytical kind of answers. I think it means that we are a force postured for future conflict, not a force postured for the same enemies of Iraq and Afghanistan, or that we have, and so it is a forcing function to move forward, to look forward. When you look at the national defense strategy, it's all like very clear that like China is the threat. Now,
of course.
Whether we end up fighting that war or not, but you have to position yourself, ready yourself to fight the highest threat, and then if you fight
anything below that, like it's always
Yeah.
okay to echelon down. It's never okay to have echelon up.
Yes.
And so the commandant, just like all the service chiefs, has to say, like, what is the Secretary of Defense? What are they saying is the most important thing to focus on? They're clearly saying, focus on a war in the Pacific. Okay. So then you have to, if you are in charge of manning, training, and equipping the organization, like the commandant is, you have literally a duty and responsibility to start to position that force and align that force with what the Secretary of Defense and the DoD are saying are our focus. And so, you know, in terms of like the internal machinations and dealings of force design, there could be much debated. So I don't want to like sit here and talk
of course. Yeah, of course.
tube artillery or tanks or whatever. But at the end of the day, the intentions and the concept, I think, are generally sound. And, you know, it's so crazy that I left the fleet in 2017 and I came back to the fleet in 2022. And it was all the same stuff.
Really?
From when I checked into the fleet in 2009, you know, and so the fact that from 2009 to 2022, I had the same MVG, the same helmet, you know, the same rifle, the same. It's like, well, things weren't moving, you know, at an acceptable pace, and
you think something like this does that?
I mean, and so we went from moving at the speed of a, like, you know, glacier to actually there you can look around and you can now in fact see some basic advancement and modernization for the warfighter, which it's in to somewhat like an indictment on the Corps that it's like, what were you doing over the last 20 years?
Yeah, of course.
That the only kind of thing you could think of is like, we'll make a bigger flak jacket. You know, you got the MTV, you know, like add more neck protection and a bigger groin pro, and like add armpit protection. Like that's your innovation, you know, or add more armor to the outside of an MRAP, you know, like that is not very innovative. That is not a force that's serious about
what they're doing. Yeah, of course.
So it does seem that the commandant has put a boot in everybody's ass to get them moving, and I think
from a logistical standpoint, it looks difficult.
Yeah, and the commandant's honest about that, you know, and so this force design update right up front, this says like, you know, where we're still short is how we're going to sustain it and how we're going to logistically support it. So I think the overall honesty through force design has been refreshing, and it's been pretty transparent, and it's been saying like, here's what we suck at, and here's the problem, and here's where we're still not like making enough progress. And I think it's rare to see that kind of candor in like general officer kind of correspondence.
Of course,
and service level correspondence, rather than just kind of like, oh, things are great, everything is good, for the best of the
check
best.
Check the box. Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I do think there are certainly logistical elements around force design that remain unanswered. So we'll figure it out.
Gotcha. Well, Tom, that's all I got on my end. Do you have anything that you want to promote, or you want to talk about, or you want to leave us with something?
No, man. I appreciate you having me.
Appreciate you. There you have it, guys. Major Tom Schueman. Thanks for coming. Semper Fi. Hoorah. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, get some.